Okay, testing. Right, we're ready to go. Okay, thanks for having me, Moshe. I'm here in Male Adamim.
Yes, Male Adamim. Yeah, it's great to have you here. Yeah. Welcome.
Thanks. So, my friend Mark runs Krav Maga courses, and he came and trained with you and gave me a bit of background on you. Thought it'd be very interesting to come over and speak to you. So, you're running IKI Krav Maga?
Right. Well, IKI, which stands for Israeli Krav International, is an outgrowth of my 30-plus years of martial arts. And when I heard your podcast with Mark, one of the things that impressed me most is we seem to be on a very similar journey. And one of the things, again, that I liked about your podcast with Mark is Mark's brutal honesty with himself and with the world. Because we look at martial arts, and a lot of us got turned on to martial arts in the movies, Bruce Lee, The Karate Kid, so forth. And you begin to think that stuff is real.
Yeah. And
that's why you go into it, and it looks great. And it's not.
Yeah. Everybody's got a fantastic physique, and
right.
Yeah.
And the timing is perfect, and you forget that this is all choreographed. And take 27, let's do that again, let's try that again, a little more action.
Yeah.
And when you get down to real people and real bodies and real situations and real crime and real violence, you see it's totally different. And most people never get back past that point. I'd say 95% of martial artists never get past that point. Because to get past that point, it's in a sense a Zen thing, which is very martial arts like. What is Zen? It's basically seeing things as they are. To look and say, this is not going to work the way I thought it would work. My skills are not good enough. And to look yourself in the mirror brutally and say, is what I have today good enough? Is this enough to protect my loved ones? One of the criteria I use when I try to break through to students is I say, imagine somebody that you love, a child, your own daughter, and you say, let's put aside the business, the money, the fame, the belts, and say you're talking now about your daughter. Picture somebody that you love unconditionally, that you'd be willing to give your own life for. And then look at the technique you just did, which 10 minutes ago you said, oh, that's fine. That's great. And now I look at it again and say, my daughter's going off to college, or she's going away from home for the first time. Is it good enough for her? And if it's not, it's not good enough for anybody else. Because you have to look at every one of your students as your own children, your own child. And if you don't love your students the way you love a child, you're in the wrong business. And it doesn't make a difference. I have students who are in their 70s. It doesn't make a difference who's older. Sometimes I'll refer to I'll show pictures of my children and say, gee, one's black, one's Asian. You sure get around. But once you start with that brutal honesty, then at least you're on the right path. Without that, you're lost.
Very good. So, tell us a little about IKI and how it's running here over in Israel. How the community's changed since these classes have.
So I started off by teaching here in the neighborhood, and I taught children for nearly 19 years. And I taught in the school system. I had a class for adults, but the children was the main thing.
So from what age group was that?
I was teaching at one point from age 5, but I found the 5-year-olds too brutal. So I quit that and I made it 7, because the 5-year-olds, there's something special about them. They don't know their own limitations.
Yeah.
And they would play games and they'd jump on me. Before you know it, one kid would knee me in the groin accidentally. Another kid would kick me in the ear. I remember being kicked in the ear by a child. And they're not aware of what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I just said, no, I can't do 5-year-olds. So I stopped that. So basically I taught 7 through high school. Because at 18, all the Israeli kids go to the army.
Yeah.
So at 18, I would lose them all. And I'd only get a few back after 21 years old. Because they'd be away for 3 years.
Yeah.
So it was mostly kids and a small adult class. And what happened gradually is a group of American students were coming to Israel. They were called Israel advocacy groups. They were groups that were pro-Israel, and they'd come to Israel for 10 days to learn how to hear the Israeli side of the conflict, so when they go back to American universities, they can counter them with the correct arguments and facts. So I was invited by these groups to teach them a couple of Krav Maga classes, because one of the organizers said, You're standing there with the flag of Israel, you're likely to be attacked.
Yeah.
And today even more so than then. So I was invited, and I started teaching these groups. And then eventually I get this email, would you like to come to America for 10 days, get paid $500 a day, all expenses paid, hotels, treated like a celebrity, greeted at the airport. I was like, where do I sign up? You know?
Yes, I would like that.
I just wrote back 3 letters, YES. That was it.
Yeah.
And that began my travels.
Yeah.
And then from that, gradually people from outside those circles began to hear about me and come to the lectures, the seminars at the universities. Mm-hmm. And I began to get invited to martial arts academies, police, military.
Fantastic.
I was brought in once by the U.S. military, twice actually, by U.S. Special Forces, by another time by the infantry. And then people started saying, we'd like to be certified. And I didn't have an organization or anything. So I formed the organization to, as I was requested to meet the needs of people that were looking to be certified. And one of the reasons they came to me was, without disparaging any other organizations, is they had experienced, let's just say, the commercial brunt and manipulation of other organizations that they felt were not really out for their best interests. Mm. And a lot of people had been burnt.
Yeah. Monetary gain. Are we talking monetary gain?
Yeah. In the States.
Yeah.
And also in England. Some people came from England, and exorbitant fees and lack of caring. And
yeah, that's interesting. If we can just touch on that now, seeing as it's come up. You kind of have an interesting thing that you run within the community here, like almost a pay-as-you-feel approach.
Yeah. So, now, I'm not a communist. Let's make that clear. I have no problem with being fabulously wealthy. So if that ever happens...
Me neither.
If millions come my way, I'm totally okay with that. You know, the more money I have, truthfully, the more people I can help.
Yeah.
I live modestly, as you can see. But in the community, we have a thing where you can pay, I guess it's the equivalent of £10, £5 or nothing, whatever you want, as long as you show up.
Yeah.
And you get all the video clips and DVDs and everything for free.
Yeah.
As long as you just show up and train. If you can pay something, you can pay something.
And again, that's down to your care and attention for people's well-being, isn't it? About caring about each student that you take on, as opposed to the fees that they are willing to pay. It's more about the well-being of your pupils.
Right. Once you stop caring, this job becomes extremely boring. It's like, a comedian. You go and you give the same comedy routine from town after town. If you don't love what you're doing, you're going to be bored out of your mind.
Yeah.
And I go to all over the place, and often it's the same routine. And people ask, how can you keep doing it? I've been on the road for 15 years.
Yeah. And
I say 2 secrets: deep-seated motivation and coffee. Those are the 2 things that go. Because I'll be honest with you, sometimes you get into a room and just got off the plane and you're so tired, and you get in there and you look at these people, like, people say, hi, nice to meet you. Like, you look at them like, yeah, just leave me alone.
Yeah.
And then the seminar starts, you look out at the room, and you see all these people who a minute ago were meaningless strangers. And then you suddenly look at them, and as I'm like looking at you and Mark now, you just look at somebody, and you suddenly say, there's a human being over there. There's a soul over there. There's a person over there. Mm. And they think highly enough of me that they took off time to come here and be with me today, because they feel I can help them.
Yeah.
I have this enormous honor and responsibility now. And now I'm 100% in the game.
Yeah.
Now I'm looking at you and saying, this person came to me for some solutions. I can't fail them. Mm. I've got to do something for them. I've got to help them. I've got to give them the best that I can give them as I know today.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps me going.
Yeah. But we touched earlier on a little bit about that can be quite draining, can't it? The travel and the teaching, and about looking after your own well-being to be fresh enough to give the best delivery for your classes as well. How do you manage that? How do you balance that?
It's the motivation. I mean, sometimes, I always tell myself, don't get sick, don't collapse on the road. And often, when I come home, that's when the body collapses, and I become like a zombie.
Yeah.
And it's like the body saying, I gave you everything I have.
Yeah.
Now it's my turn.
Yeah.
You got to give me something back.
Yeah.
But on the road, it's like every place you go, and to be honest, it gives me a huge appreciation for rock stars.
Yeah.
Sometimes you look at these rock stars like, why are they taking drugs? Why are they doing this? And then you look and say they're on the road for months. They're physically, Mick Jagger, Jumping Jack Flash.
Yeah.
How does he do it? He's like all these years. It's almost unfathomable. They're traveling all over the world and they're giving such huge amounts of energy. How do they do it? It's almost inevitable. I mean, my drug is coffee and just the motivation, but you need something to keep you going.
So it's kind of a push through mentality until the time comes and a natural time will arrive to rest.
When you have a chance to rest, but it's looking at the people and remembering why you're here.
Yeah.
Remembering you have a commitment. I mean, again, the comedian Steve Martin, he was giving some comedy routine. He was saying, you have to get there and saying, I'm so thrilled to be here in Oshkosh, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
You guys, I'm sorry, Chicago. You guys are the best. So it can be difficult.
Yeah, but very disorientating, I imagine, at times.
It can be very much so. And it for me, it's only when the class gets started and you start looking at the people that suddenly that energy kicks in. Honestly, when I get off the plane sometimes and you meet people at the airport, it's like, just put me in the trunk.
Yeah.
Leave me alone till we get there. Like, please don't make me talk to you for 2 hours in the car now. But like when the show begins, and you look at the people, and again you think about the fact they honored me by making that effort to be here for me.
Yeah.
I can't look at it as just like another gig. For me, it may be Stop 27, but for them, it's the event.
Yeah.
And you have to look at it from their perspective.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, just go back to the community here. So you were saying it's bringing within this community. Say it again, Ma'ale Adumim.
Ma'ale Adumim.
Yeah. It's brought a lot of people here who wouldn't normally.
Absolutely. There's people that never would have come to Israel and never would have interacted with a community like this had it not been for Krav Maga. They never would have come to Israel. They're not your standard tourists. And here, this is off the beaten track. There's no historical sites over here, per se. And here, the people will stay with families who live here.
Yeah.
And they'll have conversations and they'll get to meet the people. Not the politicians, not the ambassador's declaration, but ordinary, everyday people. Yeah. And it forms a bond. We just had last week Holocaust Memorial Day.
Yeah.
And almost everybody here, even though we're 75 years since the war, almost everybody here can trace back family members who were victims.
Yeah.
And that, sometimes people don't realize outside the Jewish community the impact that has. You grow up knowing that most of your family was destroyed by the outside world that just didn't care about you. And you're born into a traumatic situation.
Yeah.
But when you have people come here from that outside world and human beings interact, it changes everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I often tell people like this. I'll ask at a seminar, what is the best defense? And they'll say, the universal block, the punch, the kick, whatever. I say, no. You know what the best defense is? And I'm not trying to sound naive, and it's not always possible. But ideally, the best defense is you take your enemy and you make him your friend.
Yeah.
Because then you don't have to worry about him. And you don't have to watch your back. And in a sense, besides teaching self-defense, what we're doing with IKI is we're forming
a community
and an international friendship.
Yeah.
And of course, we're not going to solve all the problems of the world, but every two people that meet
is
the beginning of the solution.
Yeah.
In fact, I have a peace plan.
Go for it, let's hear it.
My peace plan is called one cup of coffee at a time. And what is that? On Tour and Train, for example, we go and we meet with a couple of Bedouin that I know. The Bedouin are the nomadic Arabs who came here in the 7th century from Arabia. And don't always have the best reputation, but I know a couple of Bedouin, and they have a little stand, a camel, they go on camel rides and buy some trinkets, whatever. And I go there and I bring people over there and they buy a few things and I help them make a living. And we sit down and they treat us to coffee. And I say, peace begins when you and I sit and have a cup of coffee and chat. Yeah. Not when the prime ministers meet. It begins when you and I meet, two people. Little by little. It's a slow process. Yeah. But one cup of coffee or tea at a time, that's peace. That's world peace.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. I mean, me and Mark have come over today from Jerusalem, and we're saying exactly the same. That it's great to just wander around, you know, the community outside of the tourist attractions.
Yeah, meet the common man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah. Yeah, really good. So, for people who don't know much about Krav Maga, could you tell us about Emil Lichtenfeld?
Yeah. So basically, first, what does the word Krav Maga mean? Maga is contact. Literally means touch. Just as an example, Devik Maga is glue. So Maga is touch. You want to say you need for your job some personal touch, you say Maga Ishi. So Maga is physically touching. Krav actually means close, but since ancient times the word Krav has also come to mean combat, because combat was always close.
Okay.
So technically the word Krav means close, but in this context it means combat. So roughly it translates as close quarter combat. Now, to give a rough history, which is not what you'll find on the standardized Krav Maga websites, they'll always say Emil Lichtenfeld came from in 1942, whatever, from Czechoslovakia, was appointed by the Israeli government to found Krav Maga, etc., etc. It's completely false. The truth is that Krav Maga, like most systems, has no real specific beginning. I'll just go through a really rough history. Around 1880, political events around the world led to changes in population movements, and many, many Jewish people came to Israel, fulfilling a lifelong dream, centuries dream of returning to Israel. And when they came here, they were greeted by violence. They were greeted by people that didn't want them to be here. And they would just beat the Jews to death. The Jews were known as Walad al-Mitha, which means child of death, to the Arabs, meaning you're an easy target. When did Krav Maga begin? Some anonymous person in some anonymous fight probably lifted up his hand and defended himself, and you can say that's when Krav Maga began, without a specific name. Fast forward, gradually, people formed associations to learn how to fight back, which included use of firearms, use of sticks. Sticks was a big part of self-defense in Israel until the mid-1950s.
Okay.
Improvised weapons. Gradually what happened is, as Jewish immigrants came from other countries, each one contributed something. There was a guy named Moshe Horowitz who was an expert in jiu-jitsu. Another guy, Gershon Kobler, was an expert in boxing. And each one would add something to the pot, whatever they knew. And in those days, gradually it became known as Kapap, which means Krav Panim El Panim. Kapap is a KPP abbreviation. Krav face-to-face, which means face-to-face combat. And again, the main emphasis that I know of, because of old people I've spoken to, was use of the short stick and the long stick. That they would say that in those days most people went by foot. You travel with your walking stick, and it becomes your defensive mechanism. Gradually, as more people came in, they formed a course, and I think the first course was held in 1939, if I'm not mistaken, and 8 instructors or so were graduated as self-defense instructors. Emil Lichtenfeld, on his own, was developing something back in his home country of Slovakia, and he came to Israel, if I'm not mistaken, 1941, 1942, and if I'm not mistaken, he participated in the second instructor's course. Now, if you participated in an instructor's course, how could you later claim to be the founder? Which he never did. Anyway, gradually 2 terms came to use, Kapap and Krav Maga. Around the late 1950s or so, early 1960s, they took a vote and decided which name to use, and they chose Krav Maga, whatever the reason was. Emil Lichtenfeld became famous, if I understand correctly, because he retired from the army in 1964, I believe, and in 1966 opened the first storefront dojo for Krav Maga. There were no black belts in Krav Maga. Nobody ever had such a rank, because it was a military system. Now, the other guys who were teaching Krav Maga, who were no less famous and no less important, when they finished their military service, they just went on to whatever jobs they did, opened a shop or who knows what.
Yeah.
And they became erased from history, basically. But Emil Lichtenfeld had a school, and he taught the general public. And that's why his name became associated with all the official ranks and things like that.
Yeah. Okay.
He was a contributor, from what I understand.
Yeah. Yeah. He was a Hungarian guy, right?
Well, again, Slovakia, Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic, Hungary, it's all the same area.
Yeah.
It depends what year you're talking about.
Okay. Yeah.
For example, my mother's family comes from this area.
Okay.
Some of them spoke Hungarian, like my grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
But then, after the First World War became part of the Czech Republic, so my grandfather's cousin, who was 12 years younger than him, speaks Czech.
Yeah.
And then it became part of the Soviet Union, and then they spoke Russian. So you have people who are in the same exact location, some of them learning Russian, some of them learning Hungarian, some of them learning Slovakian, and some of them learning Czech. It all depends on who the conquering army happened to be at that time.
Yeah.
So again, it's just the old joke: a guy comes to apply for a job, and the boss looks at his resume and says, "Oh, I see you were born in Hungary, educated in Czechoslovakia, did your master's in Slovakia, did your doctorate in the Soviet Union. You're a well-traveled man." And he says, "I've never left home."
Absolutely, yeah. Let's talk a bit more about your ethos and how awareness plays its role in self-protection. We did have, when we arrived, we were chatting a little bit about that, and about how, the Van Damme muscles and perfect technique on take 27 isn't essential.
We look at the movies, we see our superheroes, and I am a big fan of martial arts movies. I have a friend who's a screenwriter who wrote the screenplay for Bloodsport and Double Impact and Lionheart. It's all great, as long as we know that it's entertainment.
Yeah.
So, when it comes to actual self-defense, the truth is, after years of studying real-life cases, and always trying to understand more, and always trying to interview people that have been in real-life cases, is awareness, situational awareness, but more than that, scenario training, and mental training and scenario stuff.
A mindful approach.
The mindful approach. So we're saying, meaning if you're in an airport and you look around and you say, let me see who's here. Let me see where a potential attack might come from, and let me play it through in my mind. What if a guy's going to pick up a lead pipe over here? What if a guy's going to pull a knife out of a suitcase? How am I going to respond? Because what happens is, martial arts gives us tools. But in most cases, when we reach for that toolbox, it's locked. And it's locked by our mind. So the mental training is what opens up the toolbox. That you're there and you're prepared to use it. You're envisioning a situation. I'll give you something that I read. When the tsunamis happened in Asia, there were people that were saved. And they asked them how they were saved. And it turns out that these people did exactly the opposite of what any professional would recommend. They were big movie people. Now, when people watch movies, some people get really into it. Somebody dies and they start crying. And you start saying, hey, it's just a movie. But for them, it's not just a movie, because they're in the movie themselves. They're living it. So some of these people that survived, they were Arnold Schwarzenegger. They were whoever it was, Sylvester Stallone. So in their minds, they've actually lived through it already. So when the tsunami happened, the mind says, been there, done that, I know what to do. So it wasn't that they were trained.
Almost maybe it stops the freeze of the adrenal dump of that event.
Exactly. It's like I'm familiar with this already. I know what to do because I've been through it. I'm familiar with it. It's the difference between a guy getting on stage with his guitar and looking at the audience and freezing and I can't remember where to put my fingers. And a guy who's a veteran performer, I've been there, I've done that. It's all the same. So,
however, this is done all in mind.
It's mind training, which is not as popular, because when you come to a class, you want to kick, you want to punch, you want to sweat, you want to feel like a great workout. Somebody starts talking to you about how to protect yourself in your mind, it almost seems like, what are we doing here? We're wasting our time. I always tell people, if you want me to recommend one book, I've written 11, but I won't recommend my own book. I'll recommend the book that my dear friend Arthur Cohen recommended. I have it here in my library someplace. It's called The Gift of Fear by a man named Gavin de Becker. And I don't know him personally. I don't get any percentages off the book at all. Though I made a lot of money for him, because at least 100 people have bought that book because of me. And I tell people, you don't want to sweat, you don't like doing push-ups, whatever, you don't like doing the Van Damme split. You don't have to. Read that book, The Gift of Fear, and that will show you many ways of using your mind to translate fear into actual self-defensive measures that will save your life, much more than any one technique.
Yeah.
So again, it's not the kind of thing you expect to see when you come to a martial arts class, because you want to move, you want to sweat, you got your t-shirt on, you're ready to move. But without that, without the mental training, we're really not prepared, and that's the truth.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, to get past the fact versus fiction, if it's okay to talk about your nephew.
Yeah.
I mean, run us through the scenario. That's close to home, isn't it?
Yeah.
Your nephew, and tell us about that.
I've had several friends and relatives attacked, but this really came close to home. I received the news when I was on the way home from a seminar in Germany, and my brother called me and said that my nephew had been stabbed, but he's all right. Then we got the details. He was 32 years old at the time, and in Israel you serve in reserves. He was a combat soldier. He had served in the Second Lebanon War, had seen the death of 2 commanders, went through a lot already.
Yeah. His
unit had killed, I believe, 28 Hezbollah terrorists in one day. So he's a military veteran. He's seen his action. Some martial arts training, not a lot. And of course the Army offers some basic Krav Maga. So this particular day he was on guard duty. And again, it creates boredom. You're in the sun, hours and hours pass, days pass and nothing happens. The mind tends to wander. Yeah. In the meantime, an Arab car drove up in a vehicle and started complaining about something. He wanted my nephew to call in the case. There was, unknown to my nephew, there was an Arab young man of 19 years old, 1.90 m, a muscular man, young muscular man, and he was walking around looking to find a soldier who was distracted. At the moment that my nephew leaned to the side into his walkie-talkie to report the case that this guy was complaining about, the guy ran up to him and attacked him. My nephew fortunately responded with a bit of a flinch response, and the knife hit him in the back and towards the neck, 3 millimeters, the doctor said, from a major artery. Okay. He continued fighting with him, fell to the ground with his rifle, fought him off, and eventually he managed to survive, and the guy dropped the knife and ran away.
Yeah.
As my nephew said, you're sitting there bored out of your mind. The sun, the heat, whatever it is, the cold, the rain.
Yeah.
But this guy's on drugs. This guy's on religious motivation. This guy's on hyped up on nationalism. This guy's, my nephew used the following words. His whole life is wrapped up into that 1 second.
Yeah.
He's been waiting his whole life for this. He's ready. He woke up, and apparently this particular guy had come by several days in a row, but now he was ready. There he is with his knife, and his whole life is bound up in this one moment.
Yeah.
You're not ready.
Yeah.
It's not a fair match.
It's not just a normal day at work.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you are a soldier, and you are looking around, even in this case.
Yeah.
But still, you're not really ready.
Yeah.
But this guy's ready, and all the odds are in his favor.
Yeah.
It's not a fair fight. And again, there's no weight classes. Guy's taller than you. He's bigger than you. He's stronger than you.
Yeah.
Younger than you.
He knows what's coming.
He knows what's coming. Exactly. Yeah. It's not a karate match. It's not an MMA fight.
Yeah.
The MMA fight is nothing like this.
Yeah.
You're not in the 65 to 70 kilo category, men 25 to 30. And he said for months he was thinking afterwards, what could I have done to prepare myself better? And the only thing he can think of, as a non-martial artist really, is imagining every possible angle of attack in any situation you're in.
Yeah.
And that's when I said to him, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. That's
the real training.
Yeah.
Of course you need the techniques, you need to be physically prepared, but if you don't have that mindfulness and that imagining what could happen, you're not ready.
Yeah. I wonder if that's the mind's natural response to a traumatic situation, that we do run those scenarios by, and a lot of outsiders can look and we need to let that go now, but actually it's a tool that's helping us to prepare us for future events, that if you allow that process, you can take a wealth of knowledge for it where people may want to stop you reliving that. Does that make sense?
If I understand correctly, I get a lot of resistance to what I'm trying to do, because people want to live in peace. People don't want to think about this. They say the people have said to me, I'd rather take the risk of being stabbed than live my life in the way you're describing. I don't want to live that way. Again, we just had Holocaust Day. I was talking to a friend about people's reaction to the Holocaust, people that survived it. Some people became afterwards very vigilant, very religious, very devout, and very into nationalism and self-defense and so forth. And other people went the entirely opposite direction. I want to forget it all. There are some people who didn't even tell their children what they went through, and didn't even tell their own children that they were in fact Jewish. Because they felt I was attacked because I was Jewish. If my children don't know they're Jewish, nobody else will. So one is a complete immersion in the defense and in the lifestyle, and the other is complete diversion, in a sense, running away from it and saying, the less I know, the better. I don't want to think about it anymore. I want to live a good life. So everybody reacts to it differently. And a lot of what we agree on here, a lot of people will say, I don't want to live that way. I'd rather be ignorant and not live my life constantly looking over my shoulder, watching my back, saying this guy might attack me. And if I get attacked, God help me.
Yeah, but I mean, this is where the borderline between paranoia and awareness happens, isn't it? And you explained that really well before we started the podcast, actually. Run that by
the car.
Yeah.
So I tell people, when people say I'm paranoid, there's an old saying, I forgot who said it, I think Napoleon quoted it, that just because you're paranoid doesn't mean that people aren't out to get you. You might be paranoid anyway. They might be out to get you anyway. But so I give the analogy of a car. And I say, anybody who ever drove a car, raise your hand. I'm going to prove to you in 30 seconds that you're paranoid. Why? You have your eyes, you have your ears. You're using all of those things. You have your legs and your hands. Let's take it a step further. Your hands are on the wheel at all times. Your legs are on the brakes and on the gas, and you're ready to do what needs to be done, either brake or quickly turn. So you're using all your limbs and all your abilities. You're using your ears to hear if somebody warns you, watch out, or if you hear a crash. You're using your eyes to see the front window, the side windows, the rear view mirror, the right rear view mirror, the left rear view mirror. So you're basically paranoid, I tell them. You're using your body, your eyes, your ears, your legs, your limbs.
You're in a state of heightened awareness because you know the potential of that situation.
And you're running scenarios through your mind. What if this guy tries to cut me off on the right or on the left? What if the car in front of me stops short? What if that big cement truck in front of me stops short? All that cement's going to fall on my car. I could be buried alive in cement. So you're doing all the things I'm asking you to do in self-defense. You're already doing it while you're driving. Defensive driving. So all you got to do is apply. But you're not paranoid. You can enjoy the ride and listen to music and talk to a friend. So all I'm asking you to do is do the same thing with self-defense. Make it a habit the same way.
So we're talking about an integrated awareness, aren't we, that becomes just natural awareness of your environment.
Not to take your cell phone and walk across the street texting and get hit by a car.
Same thing. Very good. I'm just thinking where we can go next. You have a wealth of knowledge on the history of this place, so maybe we should go there. I mean, we were going back 400 years.
Well, if you take Maladumim, so where does the name come from? The name comes from the Bible. I think it's the Book of Joshua, chapter 15, verse 7, if I'm not mistaken, where it says, Israel was divided in those days into 12 tribes, the 12 sons of Jacob, each one had a tribe, and I think it said the border between the Benjamin and the tribe of Judah passes by Maladumim in the Book of Joshua. So this goes back a long time. Obviously, it's not the same town. This is a modern town established where the archaeologists and historians believe that the old town once was. So it's nearby here. But our roots, our history goes back here 3,500 years to the days of the Bible. I mean, when we look out the window here and I see Jerusalem, I know that the Romans, when they came to conquer Mount Masada, which was one of the places we visit on our tour and train program, they passed through where I could see from my window. Meaning I could go out to my porch and look there and imagine in the year 70, or the year 73 actually, the Roman soldiers were coming by here, marching down to the Dead Sea to conquer the last resistance, the last stronghold of Jewish rebellion in the year 73. And here I am, nearly 2,000 years later, living here.
Drinking coffee.
Drinking coffee. I don't know if they had coffee in those days. They were missing out. They had wine, But it's an incredible sense of destiny and fulfillment of one's destiny to be here.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that more and more, a large percentage of the world is against us and taking sides against truth. I mean, just this morning I was reading about Lord Balfour.
Okay.
English fellow. The Balfour Declaration. I happen to have it right here. I was, I'm always reading history, always looking things up. So, the English recognized the traditional Jewish connection to this land. They knew their history. And here it was, London, England, 2nd November 1917. Arthur Balfour, writing to Lord Rothschild in London. Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which might prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in other lands, in any other country. So it was called Palestine, even though there was no Palestinian nation. As you see, he points out here, it doesn't say anything about a Palestinian people, it just refers to existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. The British used the name Palestine to call it the British Mandate of Palestine, because the Emperor Hadrian, in the year 135, established the name Philistine or Palestine or Palestine, however he pronounced it, in an attempt to erase the Jewish connection to the land.
Yeah.
So the name Palestine actually relates back to the Philistines, who are no longer here at all. They moved to Iraq about 1,300 years ago, who came from the Aegean Islands around Greece, came to Israel around the 7th century before the Common Era, were displaced by the Babylonian conquerors and taken to Babylon, which is now Iraq. So the real Palestinians are all in Iraq, so to speak. But the Roman Emperor Hadrian, in looking for some sort of name, just fetched this name sort of out of ancient history and named the region as a governing area as Palestine. Okay. But there never was any actual country called Palestine, or any people called Palestinians, or any language called Palestinian, and so forth. So here we see the British, they played a major role in recognition of historical rights here in Israel. So for us, coming home here, despite all the problems, is a fulfillment of a dream.
Yeah. And I mean, there's been some recent problems, hasn't there? And is it Ashkelon City?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, every now and then our neighbors in the north or the south get angry for whatever reason and decide to unprovoked attacks. And
when was this? Sorry, just when was this attack?
This recent attack was just over the weekend. When Saturday, on Shabbat, we don't listen to news, but on Saturday night I turned on the news and I saw a person was killed. 300 rockets were fired into southern Israel. I think one of them was shot down by the Iron Dome, was intercepted. One that was going over one of the major cities. But unfortunately, the south, and every few years it switches. Could be the north being attacked by the Hezbollah in the north, or Hamas in the south. We're under constant attack, and you could sit all day having coffee in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem and debating people about what's the best solution, but nobody really has any solution.
Yeah, and that was southern Israel. So life in Israel, how is that for you and your community?
Well, again, like I said, a few times we just marked Holocaust Memorial Day, and we know what life was like back in Poland, Hungary, Germany, all these sort of places. Where over there, basically, we were a guest. As much as we considered ourselves, the Jewish people considered themselves German or French or whatever it was, the fact was we were always looked upon by the majority of the population as a guest. There's a powerful song written in the 1970s about the Jewish community in Russia. At the time, there was a big movement of let my people go, that Jews around the world were fighting for the rights of Jews living in Russia and Ukraine and the whole Soviet Union to leave. That they wanted to leave, but the Russian government, the Soviet government, didn't allow them. They were called refuseniks, people that were refused exit. They wanted to come to Israel and they weren't allowed to. And it garnered a whole international movement of Jewish people and supporters to have them leave. An American Jewish music band called Safam came out with an amazing song. I'm not going to sing it, don't worry. And they have this line, we are leaving Mother Russia, we have waited far too long. We are leaving Mother Russia, when they come for us we'll be gone. And there's one verse, something along the lines of, for 1,500 years we called this land our own. We loved the Russian soil just as much as anyone. Our young men, in countless wars, they fell for you. But when they died, you never called them son. You always called them Jew. We are leaving Mother Russia. We have waited far too long. And this is the story of the Jew in the exile. You have good times, you have bad times, but it's not our home. I was born in the United States. America's not my home. Only Israel. This is our only home. This is the place where the holidays, the national holidays, are my holidays. I don't have to ask for permission to take off time for a Jewish holiday.
Yeah.
I could walk around openly as a Jew and not worry about how I'll be looked upon. This is our home. And any Jew who doesn't realize it is simply making a mistake.
Yeah, yeah. And how is it for, obviously, you train Jews and non-Jews within the community. How is that received? We did touch on it earlier, but it's very welcoming, isn't it? It's from
when I first started, we had this program called Tour and Train, and now we also have programs which are just training. But the idea was to bring people to Israel to train in Krav Maga here in the home of Krav Maga, because when you're here, you get to experience it more. Even just by having this conversation, you see where the passion comes from.
Yeah,
and at first, the community looked at it kind of odd. Like, why are you bringing these outsiders into our community? A lot of people here are descended from Holocaust survivors. We had one student whose grandmother was very upset that he was becoming friendly with a German young man. And he would come back and say, Grandma, you don't understand. You've never met a nicer person than this fellow Stefan.
Yeah.
You know, and it began to form bonds of friendship between the local population that was hosting them and meeting them and getting to know them, and the students who were coming. In fact, sometimes you have students who come back a second time and they want to stay with the same families.
Yeah.
And they keep in touch and they write to each other. And it's changed this attitude of the whole world is against us to we have some friends who have a face and have a name and we know them personally.
Yeah.
It's not the same about like reading about in a newspaper as getting to know somebody face to face.
Yeah.
And saying we do have supporters, we do have friends. I'll tell you one story. A guy came from Holland, and he was here in Israel for the first time for 2 weeks. And he kept walking around, and people kept coming up to him and shaking his hand and saying thank you. And he was completely baffled.
Yeah.
He said, I've been all over the world. I've been to Spain. I've been to China for some training. I've been to Japan for some karate training. Like, nobody thanks me. Like, I'm here for my own purposes. I came to visit your country, to train, whatever. Why would anybody thank me?
Yeah.
And I said, you just don't get it. You don't understand the Jewish people. You don't understand their national trauma. We're used to being hated by everybody. When you come to Israel for a visit, you're saying, I stand with you. You're saying, I support you.
Yeah.
I am your friend.
Yeah.
And we're so desperate for friends that people just walk up to you and shake your hand and saying, thank you. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for getting to know us a little bit better.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing our journey.
Yeah.
And we do appreciate it.
Fantastic. I mean, Mark's here from Rich Combat with us. We're good friends. We've had a fantastic time, haven't we?
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed listening to them stories, actually, on the history of it. I mean, what I'm interested in, Moshe, is obviously your story as well. Your history in martial arts, how you got involved in it, and you know what drew you more to Krav Maga. I know obviously with Krav Maga, it's the full ethos of Krav Maga is that it's fluid and it's forever evolving, and that's what I really appreciate, that you've taken that to the next level with IKI.
Thank you.
It's true. I mean, I know you've walked the walk. You've done the 1980s training where we're bleeding knuckles and and we can hardly walk. I know you've done that style of training, but I love how you've now taken it to another level on the awareness side of things. Obviously, that's my main focus with myself as an instructor. But I'm really interested in your personal story.
So I'll tell you, I had no interest in martial arts growing up, really, and two kind of from completely different areas came to push me into it. I had a friend who was studying karate. I think it was Shorin-ryu karate at the time, and he kept saying, "Yeah, you got to come. But yeah, eventually." Now there was a rabbi. His name was Rabbi Meir Kahana. He was actually assassinated by an Arab in New York, and he kept saying, "Jews must learn martial arts." He said, "Jews must learn how to shoot, and every Jew must learn martial arts." And I said, like, yeah, I should. Eventually, that's one of the things, today they call it the bucket list, one of the things I'll do eventually. And then my sister-in-law saw the movie The Karate Kid, which came out, and she wasn't interested in martial arts at all. "You got to watch that movie, we're all going to go see it again, you got to come with me." So I went and I saw The Karate Kid, and that, combined with this rabbi and this friend pressuring me, I finally decided to go give it a try, and try my first karate lesson. I found recently I was clearing out some stuff in my mother's house after a flood, and I found an aerogram that I wrote, apparently after my first karate lesson, saying, "I think this is going to be good for me." Little did I know, become my career. Then eventually I went back to New York, and I was looking for a place to train. And I was looking for a place with hard contact. I wasn't looking for the easy way out. Went to a lot of karate schools, and eventually ended up in the Kyokushin Karate School of a teacher who passed away recently. His name was Saiko Shin Shiguro Oyama from Tokyo. He was a student of the great Masoyama in the Kyokushin style of karate. And that's what I trained in for a while. Then I returned to Israel, and I was looking for a place to train here as well. I ended up with a fellow named Itai Gil, who again, I was looking for the strongest contact, the people where there's the most injuries, the hardest hitting stuff. Not, touch combat or point system or katas, just the brutal stuff. I was in the hospital plenty of times, nose smashed, all kinds of things, head, backspinning kick to the head, the works. I've experienced everything. We used to joke that we get a discount because his school was located right next to a hospital. He said we give him so much business, So I went through all those things. And one of the things that he was teaching, we didn't even call it Krav Maga. It was just the self-defense part of it. The knives, the guns, and stuff like that. Like we did the judo, we did the kickboxing, the karate, the full contact fighting, and then we had what we called freestyle fighting, which is a combination of everything together. For my black belt test, for example, we had 40 minutes of non-stop fighting against 40 opponents, which means a bunch of guys, the best guys in the school, sit down, you fight one guy for a minute, he goes and sits down, fight another guy for a minute. First it's just the standing kickboxing stuff. Then it becomes wrestling. Then it becomes like everything combined. Judo, wrestling. What today is called MMA, mixed martial arts. Yeah. But in those days it wasn't. So I went through this whole thing, and eventually I became an instructor, and I began to teach it. And I also studied Kung Fu, and then Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and all these other sort of things that I found interesting. And I was teaching all of them. One night Kung Fu, one night karate, one night this, one night that. As time went on, gradually, I began to realize I can't do all of them. And my focus became, like, what is most important to me? Is it competition for kata? Is it sports competition? What to me personally is most important? What speaks to me? Because I really can't excel at all of them. And my students certainly can't. If you're coming once a week for this, once a week for that, you certainly can't. I mean, I was attending seminars in America for all the grappling, the ground fighting, the wrestling, the shoot fighting, whatever you want to call it, what eventually became MMA, and training in a lot of different systems to get the best. I trained with some wonderful people in ground fighting. The Gracie brothers, I trained with a lot of them. I trained a bit with with Horace Gracie, with Henzo Gracie, Mark Hatmaker, Walt Lysack, Matt Hamilton, all sorts of people in different styles of ground fighting, and Michael DePasquale Jr. And I gradually saw, I'd be watching my students, and most of it was simply too complex. Took too long to learn. Too much precision. You move your arm this way and then this way, then you come here and you come there. It just didn't seem like it was going to work. So gradually, studying what became known as Krav Maga with my teacher, which we didn't really label it as such. I was asked to teach basically Krav Maga at one point, and I said, I don't know what Krav Maga is. And I went to my teacher, and he said, oh, all that knife and gun stuff we're doing, that's Krav Maga. You are a Krav Maga teacher. I said, I am? Yeah, you are. So I can call myself a Krav Maga instructor? Yeah, you are. You're certified. They didn't have it. Okay, great. I called back. Yeah, it turns out I didn't realize it, but it turns out I am a Krav Maga instructor. I accept the job. Because I was asked to teach Krav Maga. I didn't realize until my teacher told me, yeah, you are a Krav Maga instructor. That part there with the guns, the knives, we call survival. And my focus geared to that for two reasons, but one of them was more important than the other. One is that Krav Maga is us. It's Israel, it's Jewish, it's Israeli. But more than that, much more than that, is the idea that if I could focus on one thing, I don't want to focus on producing Olympic champions in judo or karate. I want to focus on helping the average person get home safely. And when I say the average person, I mean the average person. You don't have to get fit to do this. We have people that are fat. We have people that are old.
Yeah.
Later today, we have a 70-year-old rabbi coming to train. Somebody else might look at him and say, hey, your better years are past you. You're all broken up. I'm sorry. I can't train you. But so we change the training techniques to adapt it to each person, to make it useful to this person. Because we start from the person.
Yeah.
We don't start from the art and say, hey, Andy, you've got to build up to match the art. No, we start with you, the individual, and we say, how can we make this useful to you?
Yeah, as it should be with any training or education system, in my opinion.
Look, it goes back to the Bible, the Book of Proverbs, where it says in Hebrew, Hanoch lanar al pi darko, educate the young man according to his way.
Yeah. And
it says, Gam ki yaskin lo yasur mimena, even when he gets old, he won't deviate from that. So let's think about that for a moment. Written thousands of years ago, the Book of Proverbs. Think of where we are today, educational-wise. I always love reading these new self-help books and finding out that it's all been written before in the old book. It's all been done before. You just need to read the old book carefully. What does it say in the Book of Proverbs? Who wrote it? We think King Solomon wrote it, but it doesn't really matter who wrote it. Educate the young man, meaning a person in his formidable years, according to his way. It's not my way or the highway, it's your way.
How you engage as an individual.
Right. If this doesn't work for you, I'll change it.
Yeah.
If the verbal method doesn't work, then I'll use a different method.
Yeah.
Educate the young man according to his own way. And even as he grows old, when you're no longer among the living, he shall not depart from this path, because you made it his path. You've geared it towards that individual. I can't force you, as they say, to toe the line.
Yeah.
I could discipline you for so long. You're in school until you're 18. I'll make you do it exactly the way the rule book says. But as soon as you leave at 18, you're going to take your textbook and throw it in the garbage. And I've seen people do that. And say, I'm 18, I'm free.
Yeah.
I'm
and your relationship with the whole process
is over.
Is over and wasn't enjoyable and nourishing.
Right.
Which is what it should be.
Right. The moment you're free of this, I'm gone.
Yeah.
It's like we were talking before about AC/DC. So he wasn't Angus Young. He always wore the school uniform to mock it.
Okay.
As an everlasting protest against the educational system that he resented. I read the same thing about John Cleese. How angry he was about the dogma that was forced down upon him. And later he used a lot of that as his comedy routines.
Yeah.
A lot of his movies were based upon a reaction against what was forced upon him.
Yeah.
So when we take it in terms of martial arts, and we take that verse from the Book of Proverbs from so many years ago as a simple but profound educational tool, saying, don't force the material upon somebody. It's got to work for you, Andy. It's got to work for you, Mark.
Yeah.
And that's our approach to Krav Maga. And again, part of it has to involve humility. That if I see you doing that a little bit different than me, as long as you're not violating any major principles of the technique, as long as it's actually working for you
and it's functional
and
in
it's
a
functional,
reality situation.
exactly for you, I can't say, hey, you know, it's no good.
Yeah.
There, a lot of what guides me is the rabbinical teachings. And there's a saying that the rabbi said thousands of years ago, just as no two people are identical in their appearance, so are no two people identical in their opinions. Message is, learn to be tolerant. You'll never get two people with exactly the same point of view. You guys are good friends. You probably agree on a lot of things.
Yeah, we were disagreeing on a few things this morning walking around Jerusalem, actually.
Yeah. So if you take that to our subject here, to martial arts or Krav Maga, you'd say, I can't go against what the rabbi said. Just as our faces, the three of us, are somewhat different. Yeah, we all have a nose, we all have a mouth, we all have 2 ears and 2 eyes. We have the basic similarities, but there are some minor differences. So too in our application of martial arts, there's also going to be those differences. And I can't penalize Mark and say, Mark, you're not getting your black belt because you did it slightly different than I did. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Was it functional? Can you learn something from observing Mark's approach to that you will later integrate into? Yeah, it's just collaborative all the time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Collaborative.
Again, I go back to the rabbi saying there's a statement that say, I have learned much from my teachers, I have learned more from my students.
Yeah. Yeah.
It says, Mikom lamdai iskalti, which is Hebrew for, from all those who I have educated, I have become enlightened. You learn from your students.
Yeah.
We were talking about our friend Pat in Australia.
Yeah.
Well, we're training in a nice, comfortable neighborhood. He's using these techniques night after night in a pub in Alice Springs, what they call the Outback in Australia. People are coming in drunk as can be.
Yeah.
And he's 59 years old, triple bypass surgery, and these techniques are working for him.
Yeah, taking theory to reality.
Yeah. Now, he's modified a few things here and there.
Yeah.
That's fine. He's the one that a guy is chasing him with a machete.
Yeah.
You know, I've never had that experience, thank God. He told me about a case where one of the Aborigines was trying to get another one. He just came out waving the machete at his face and saying, somebody's going to die today. And there's Pat facing him alone. And he eventually subdued the guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant.
There's a job I don't want. Dealing with drunkards at 3 a.m. with machetes.
Yeah.
But again, when we're training down here, you know, we've got to think of those people.
Yeah.
So I'll give you a little story from one of our trainings. We did a counterterrorism training with a wonderful man named Steve Garr from South Africa, and he's a counterterrorism teacher. And we did a course, and he was demonstrating with live bullets how he would approach a terrorist situation. And he said, let's be honest, let's count up how many bullets I'm putting in my rifle, how many bullets I'm putting in my handgun. We're going to mimic a real situation, and then we're going to, disarm the guns. We're going to take a magic marker. We're going to go and try and find the bullets. And he had shot 30 bullets altogether. And we went together very honestly, very truthfully, like you're saying, the brutal honesty. Circle 27. And everybody started clapping. Round of applause. With noise, with shouting, with messages coming. He's over there, he's over here. This guy with changing magazines and changing from a rifle to a handgun, 27 out of 30 hit the target. Yeah. Now, what would you say? Pretty impressive, right?
Yeah.
You know what he said? 3 words I'll never forget. Not good enough. Those 3 bullets, are they your brother? Are they your son? Those 3 bullets, he says, may be 3 visits I'm going to have to make someday and say, I'm sorry that your little boy was killed because I just didn't train hard enough. So we don't look at the 27 hit the target. We look at the 3 that missed. And we repeat this as a mantra, not good enough. So I could train down here, and I'm doing okay, and I'm fine, But there's a guy out there in Australia who's working the door, and there's a guy in London working a pub, and there's somebody in South Africa, a police officer, and all over the world we have people like this.
Yeah.
We're in 37. We have a group just started in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
And they just had a case where like 230 people were killed. And my group just started teaching over there a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I was there last summer.
Really?
Yeah.
Colombo?
Colombo, Negombo. Yeah, I was in them places last August.
Wow.
Yeah. So quite harrowing to see, really, when you've kind of walked those streets. So I try and stay away from the news when something like that comes about.
So we have a group there now, and again, so when we're training here, I think of those people in all these different places, from Alice Springs to Colombo to Johannesburg to Cape Town, and whatever technique we do, I have to keep looking at myself and saying, not good enough. We have to keep striving. That's why we're always modifying things. And when I watched Mark, and every decision we make here about ranks, I make together with my assistant Esther, who you'll meet later. Unfortunately, she couldn't meet us right now. And we don't normally ever certify anyone as the first level instructor after 5 days.
Yeah.
I don't think we've ever done it.
Yeah.
It really is unprecedented.
Yeah.
And I did not know Mark's background, and I don't need to know.
Yeah.
Only later on I found out when you guys did the podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't know his ranks or anything, but I don't need to, because I can look at somebody and I can tell.
Yeah.
And we're both watching him very quietly doing his work, not complaining. And like by the third day, Esther and I got together and said, like, this guy gets it.
Yeah.
This guy understands it. We want him to be an instructor.
Yeah.
Because he can spread what we're teaching to someplace that we can't reach.
Yeah.
And he can reach people that we're not getting to.
Yeah.
And he can spread this. And we saw that he has the understanding and the talent.
Yeah.
Then we found out what kind of background he has, so it was no surprise. But
he's quiet though, isn't he?
He's quiet.
Annoyingly at times.
We'll just say, without, I don't embarrass him here, but we'll say he's very humble.
Yeah.
But these are all the qualities. So I'll get to a question you didn't ask. When
Yeah.
people ask, what are you looking for in an instructor?
Yeah.
And I get this question a lot. And we turn down a lot of people. There's people that write to me, I have a 10th degree black belt, I served in the Marines, I did this, that, etc., etc.
Yeah.
I want to be an instructor. And I say, well, the process is simple. You join IKI, you train, and then we evaluate you.
Yeah.
No, I just want to be an instructor right now. Okay.
Yeah.
So, what do we look for? Obviously, we look for someone who has the ability to teach. But the first quality we look for is love. So people look at me sometimes and say, like, I know you're old. I know that you're from the 60s, and the hippie movement and love, peace, and understanding. But, like, hey, we're talking Krav Maga. I expect to hear, like, I want to see a badass who loves to hurt people.
Yeah.
I said, the first quality I look for in an instructor is love. Because if you don't love people, you're going to be a lousy instructor. You're going to get bored very quickly.
Yeah.
The only way you can teach and not get bored is if you love the people you teach. And again, this comes from a rabbi that I know, who someone once asked him, who's your best friend in the world? And he said, you. Me? Yeah. But in 5 minutes, it's going to be him.
Yeah.
Whoever I'm talking to, that's my best friend. So when my students would ask me, who's your favorite student? I always say you.
Yeah.
Because right now my focus is on you. In 5 minutes, it may be on somebody else.
Yeah.
So we look for instructors. First of all, you have to have that feeling of caring about people. Like a doctor.
Yeah.
Everyone is special.
It's I think it's difficult for people to view some people to view it like that, isn't it? But of course it should be like that. It's
But it's not always.
No.
And I won't quote names, but I remember a certain instructor telling me, when I come to a seminar, I look at people's forehead and I see like 100 pounds or 100 euros or $100. That's what I say. I count up 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I can afford that Japanese garden,
Yeah.
And that's how they're looking at it.
Yeah.
And I tell people, it's not just about being altruistic. We all want to make a living. This is what we do for a living. We don't get paid anything. You can't pay the bills. What can you do?
Yeah.
We were not all born with a trust fund. But I say, for your sake, if you don't care about the people that you teach, you're going to get burnt out. You've got to care.
Yeah.
Otherwise, how are you going to do it? How are you going to get up every day and teach the same stuff again and again? And how are you going to improve it if you don't look at somebody and say, you know what? I mean, again, I know instructors who will say, you look at the class and there's 50 people, let's say, and you say, listen, these 5 guys are getting it. The other 45, what are they? Cannon fodder. They're paying the bills. But you 5, you're my superstars. The other 45, whatever, they come, they train. They'll eventually quit. They'll be replaced by another 45. But you're my Olympic superstars. I feel sorry for instructors like that, but it's very common.
Yeah. Brilliant. I mean, Yeah, I guess we should start looking at wrapping up now. We're just over an hour there, but it's been great chatting with you.
Likewise, thank you.
Yeah. What's coming up? Let's tell people what's coming up from your end and how they can get in touch with you, or where you're going to be on the globe.
Well, we have twice a year. We have our Tour and Train program, which is the combination of getting to know Israel and our history and training, and it's a 2-week program.
Yeah.
Then we're followed by the 5-day training, which is like what Mark did, which is basically 8 hours a day plus 2 hours at night twice a week of just training.
Yeah.
And we don't do any traveling. After that, I'll be heading out to Alice Springs again in Australia for a 3-day seminar in July. And then I'm off to a couple of weeks in South Africa, Johannesburg and Durban in August. Then I come home, and then it's back to Puerto Rico and the United States, and then Germany, Norway, and Vienna through October, November. November, once again, we start here with the Tour and Train, the 3-day training. December is a quiet month, generally because people have Christmas and all that kind of stuff. And then January, we start the whole cycle again. But more than that, I'll just say as closing remarks, we all age, and you begin to feel the effects of aging. And what I'm looking for is, number one, to improve the system, to keep improving it. I hope we look back in 10 years from now or 5 years from now and say, I can't believe we were doing those ineffective techniques 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I hope we improve it to the fact that it becomes simpler and simpler and simpler and user-friendly, the more so. That's my goal. And the second part of the goal is to get more and more people, like Mark, to teach this system, to spread it in a pure form, meaning in a form of keeping it simple.
Yeah.
Keeping it for the people.
Yeah. Men, women, children.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Special forces, housewives.
Yeah.
Gardeners and doctors.
Because the benefits of that to an individual's psychological well-being, I guess, to have that security within themselves can reduce anxieties and things like that just makes that person a better communicator. And I mean, I see certain things, not necessarily martial arts, but see similarities of how communication interaction, once it's in place, it changes lives, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So if somebody's anxious to be in an environment because of their personal safety, they avoid that environment. They've missed the exposure to an experience, and they're missing life experiences due to that. I mean, we've talked about some people we know back home who probably wouldn't come out and do this trip, because they'd be anxious about that. It's too much for them, and they're missing out a lot. That's kind of my view on things. And
very true.
Yeah,
it translates into all aspects of life. And
yeah.
I've heard so many stories throughout the years from people that their
it's
lives
not
have been
about
changed.
being Jason Bourne, is it? It's not. It's
right.
It's about.
Right. It's not just.
Yeah.
So what if you say? What if you spent your whole life training martial arts and you were never attacked? Was it a waste of time? It wasn't.
No.
Because I hear from so many people they were able to get over a bad relationship, getting fired, starting a new job, divorce, whatever it was, getting over these because of the personal sense of empowerment that they got from the training. So even if you never get into a fight.
Yeah.
I've seen, just from my own experience of several decades in the martial arts, lives transform for the better, for the happier.
Did you never get into a fight because of the awareness strategies that you'd learned? That's the question, isn't it? Because the strategies you are teaching are that maybe de-escalation and the
I have not been in a fight in a long time.
Yeah.
I did get into some fights when I was younger.
Yeah, I think most young men do.
Yeah, and part of it is, I live in a quiet neighborhood, and I'm always watching myself. The truth is, I do travel, but I watch myself, and I try to project the confidence of, like, the eye contact of, I'm watching you. I'm not looking for the fights.
Yeah.
I've had some fun ones, mostly with Arabs. And I'm not anti-Arab and I'm not anti-Muslim. We should all get along and be peaceful and have good relationships. They are our distant cousins, or so to speak.
Yeah.
But when I was younger, in New York and in California and university, there were some confrontations that
But I would say that from my experience of training with Mark over the last 10 years, definitely has my life is calmer, without a shadow of a doubt. As a whole, I think just the perspective that training martial arts and Krav Maga kind of gives you, and the awareness. I think if it's delivered in the right manner, it can only benefit people's well-being, I'd say.
It's true. The whole approach to life.
Yeah.
It's just a calmer way, a more sensible way. You don't need to prove yourself so much. You don't need to make a big fuss.
Yeah. Mindfulness, I guess.
Yeah.
So let's wrap up. That's brilliant. I've really enjoyed this. It's been good. So how can people contact you?
Well, we have a website.
Yeah.
And I'm on Facebook and all that kind of stuff. But the website is that we have a few what do you call it? The URLs. Basically www.israelkravinternational.com. So it's IKI, Israeli Krav International, but the website is israelkravinternational.com. And big presence on the web. In fact, we have a few websites, but the one that I made, the one that I manage personally, is I think 1,500 pages, all of it entirely free.
Perfect.
I like to write, and sometimes I get funny messages. Dear sir, I looked at your website. Can you send me some more information about Krav Maga? I said, well, if you've read the 1,500 pages for free on the website, if you've read my 11 books and it still hasn't been enough information, I'm sorry, but I'm at a loss. You've heard all the podcasts. I have nothing more. Like, how much more? Like,
brilliant.
It's all there. It's all it's there to read for free, and I answer every message I get.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure everybody will get a lot from this podcast, and it's been great meeting you.
Thank you.
So thanks very much for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks,
it's a
Moshe.
pleasure. Thank you.
See you later.